All About Relationships is an engaging, lighthearted, and practical show designed to help people improve their relationships in meaningful ways. Hosted by Dr. Don Allen, a certified Gottman therapist, as well as an advanced trainer for the Institute. He is also certified in emotion-focused therapy. With over 40 years of experience in the field of psychotherapy, Dr. Allen is here to provide expert guidance on strengthening marriages, parent-child relationships, friendships, and more. Through insightful discussions, audience call-ins, and guest experts, viewers receive real-world strategies to enhance intimacy, communication, and overall relationship satisfaction. So now, please welcome the host of All About Relationships, Dr. Don Allen.
And we're back. Hello. Thanks for coming back to the show. Or if you're new, welcome. Today, we're going to be talking about a little lighter subject. The last couple episodes that we did were a little heavier. I always kind of talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. But the last couple, we were really privileged to have Carolee Frederick come on and talk about the issue and topic of betrayal, which is a heavy topic, and I think she did a great job on it. Last week I talked about drift. Drift is when we kind of intend to do pretty well, but we get, I guess, customized to what we're doing in the day to day, and we kind of drift away from the things that are important. It could be anything from, how we eat, how we exercise, but certainly how we have relationships. So we talked about that last week, and I thought it was a very good show. Got some good feedback for it, so I encourage you to watch that when you have an opportunity. But today I kind of wanted, I don't know, talk about something a little lighter. So what I'm going to do is talk about a part of the Relationship House by John and Julie Gottman. As I mentioned earlier in the show, that I'm one of the trainers for them, and one of the reasons I like to talk about that particular program is because they do so much good research, and we know that stuff works. So if you follow that path, it works. And if you don't follow the path, we can pretty much predict what goes wrong as well. So I always encourage you to visit the Gottman Institute and look at all of the wonderful things they have to help your relationship. They have a lot of people that follow them, and it would be great if you were one of them too. So that's just one thing I want to shout out and give you a plug. But we're going to talk about a part of the Relationship House today called the positive perspective and forgiveness. So the title of my show today is Positive Perspective and Forgiveness. And one of the things I like about this is that, when we have arguments, when we have conflicts that are inevitable, we're not going to avoid them. One of the things we need to be able to do is to bounce back from them, right? So how do we do that? Well, this is one part of how we do that. And I hope you find it very, very interesting. So that's one of the things that I want to talk about today. So let me go to some of my notes and let's get started. All right. So a couple things, what if the biggest barrier in your relationship isn't what your partner did, but your unwillingness to forgive them or to dwell on what they did without really looking at what we did? Could holding on to small hurts be what makes your relationship feels like it's deteriorating? Interesting. How do we know when your criticism is becoming the poison that keeps you stuck in the conflict house? Now, when I say your, that sounds pretty harsh. So one of the things I want to do is soften that, because that's what we do. And that is, how is, the problem when we criticize, how is that really undermining the relationship you want to have? Okay, so one sounds like a horseman, criticism, one doesn't. Okay, very good. If repair is the superpower, you keep hearing me say, what's your superpower? If repair is the superpower, what's happening when we refuse to use it? So that's really important. What if the real danger in drifting apart isn't distance, right? It's the fact that we aren't using the tools we have to really make the relationship house restore. Remember what I said, conflict's inevitable. You're not going to be able to get away from it. You're not. So what do we need to do to get back to where we're in good stead and good positivity with people? That's just something to be thinking about, right? So I want to kind of shift a little bit. Now, Now, one of my goals in the show is it's got to be true 2,000 years ago, and it's got to be true 2,000 years from now. 2,000 years from now, I don't know that I can check on that, but my guess is some of this stuff is just always going to be this way. It's what we call kind of a classic problem. So one of the things I wanted to do, though, is to kind of pick a contemporary one. And what I'll say to that is that we all have these things that fit into that track of classic, right? Classic. So let me talk about a little bit about what I put in terms of human nature and life in these times. Okay, let's talk about that. So one thing you probably are noticing, at least I am, is we tend to be really fast paced now. We like instant gratification. We really do. I'm old enough to remember when you had a computer that was really slow in booting up. It was really slow in processing the stuff you needed to get on your computer screen to do your work or your play. And a matter of fact, you couldn't even upload pictures and stuff because it was just too slow. Can you imagine that today? Just imagine kind of feeling power breaking inside because, oh my gosh, I can't get to this. That's what we have grown into as a society. And it's wonderful because we have that instant feed right on our computer, but we sometimes don't have a lot of tolerance for when it doesn't happen. So, what can happen from that is we can do things like go to restaurants and we expect the same service we get out of our internet feed. We do. And maybe something else is happening in our society. So we want instant relief from that. We don't want to wait in line at the airport. We don't want to wait in line at the rental car agencies. We just need to get going now. Okay. But the other thing is, we expect our waiters and waitresses not to be influenced by all that media either, right? And I'm starting to hear and read some stuff and research where it's harder maybe to track our, I don't know what you'd call it. It's harder to track our order, I guess, because for some reason it doesn't register as well, right? So what happens is we don't always get what we order, or something goes wrong, or we don't get it as fast as we would like it. Okay. So then we become impatient and we may even come across as entitled, right? Then we can quickly go to our app and tell people how disappointed we were with the service of the meal or the company that provides the restaurant. So it's interesting to me because, one of the things we should be able to do is to kind of go to the positive. Me, I'm always trying to say we should be love based, not hate based. So one of the things that we can do to be love based is to understand that, people are people. And we can be grateful that they're bringing us food. I tell you, sometimes I'm just happy somebody's willing to bring it over because I didn't want to cook it tonight. So it was really nice of them to be in the waitress job and bring me my food. And it was nice of people in the back to cook it. That's the other thing. It seems to me sometimes that the media, and I think they have to do this. I don't know much about this, but I think they have to, kind of make it exciting and uh, interesting so people want to tune into it. But sometimes these shows with food, I sometimes watch them and it seems like, people are sitting there in judgment waiting for their food to come to them. And then they're going to critique it like a music critic or a theater critic. And I think it's interesting, but I wonder if we kind of absorb some of that too. I don't know. That's for somebody else. But again, what happens is we like to lead then with criticism. Okay. So, one of the things I guess I want to talk about is we get to where we are critical of people for doing the same thing that we do all the time. We're doing it too, and sometimes I think we just don't really notice that, right? So what happens is we take all of what I just said home to our special person, our husband, or our wife, our family, our friends, right? And then what happens is now we expect them to be instant, kind of like what we see on our computer, for example. So now what happens? Well, we're using the four horsemen. We're using criticism, like I kind of showed you that I did earlier in the show today, right? We don't need to say, see what you do. We need to gently express what our needs are. Those are complaints. But the other thing we need to do is we need to be gentle and we need to say, hey, how do we take care of that? Right. So kind of put some scenario down. Let me look at my notes. Yeah. And by the way, we've got Labor Day coming up. So that's a great opportunity to be critical of our family. Let's not do it. Let's go and say, hey, we really want to celebrate seeing people we haven't seen in a while and have a nice slow time with them and look at all the things we appreciate about them. Okay, so we want to do that if we can. So I want you to, I put a little assignment just to think about for us to have fun with today. Let me look at my time. All right. So just for fun, write down a list of several things in the course of the day that people have done that infuriated you or disappointed you. It could be big or little. Just write down some of the things that happened today. You don't have to write down a ton, maybe 5. With each of those examples, after you do that, try to notice if you've done anything like that in the past month. Just something like it. The same, only different. But something like that, something that you've done that that would be something that you wish you could have done a do-over or a take back. Now, notice how calm or gentle you were when you did it, right? Notice how calm and gentle you are with yourself when you've done it, right? And you want people to be okay with you when you mess up, right? You want them to be cool with you, right? So you want them to give you a pass. But we're fighting with that instant gratification that I just talked about. We're fighting with that moving on so we can do better. Okay. So one of the things that we sometimes do also is we get into, oh, I don't know, I'm going to use the media again. People like to use things like TikTok and Facebook and Instagram, and that's just to name a few, right? But we get all these fun animals, cute little pictures of them and everything, and we enjoy them so much. But maybe not. But maybe we start to get a little bit into that and we look up and an hour's gone by. And we're not really paying attention to the people that we really need to pay attention to, or maybe our animals, right? So what happens is that we run the risk of having them need more time with us. And if that happens, we're missing those 86% successful bids that the Gottman Institute says we need to have to really maintain a good relationship. Now, we can fall short of that, but we always want to try for that 86%. So now let's say we go far enough down that we're actually getting into some attachment distress with people and conflict begins to arise, right? This leaves us wide open for the 4 horsemen. I've already been talking about one, which is criticism. But then all of a sudden people become defensive. Well, hey, I like what I'm doing, and why should I be accountable? I want to do what I want to do. Or contempt, when we describe our person that's upsetting us as defective in some way. Or maybe we just go back to doing what we're doing and we don't talk to them at all. That would be criticism, defensiveness, contempt, right? And then finally, what we call stonewalling, right? So that's really, really an interesting thing. Now, I got a funny story for you that happened to me a few years ago. It was really interesting. And there was a woman who was walking down the road and she had her device up and she was texting or something. She was using her thumbs and looking down at it. But it was one of those things where I didn't know where to go. You ever have that thing where somebody comes up to you and you don't know whether to go left or right, and they're kind of doing the same thing with you? Well, that was what was happening. So I didn't know what to do. So I just kind of braced myself. I just put my legs out, wider than my shoulders, and I just kind of put my arms down around my belt. This woman bounced right off my chest. I mean, she really thumped me. I mean, she really hit my chest, bump. And she bounced back because I was braced. What she did was she went and took about 4 steps to the right and just kept texting and just passed by. She didn't say, excuse me. She didn't say, oh my gosh. It was like she bumped into a tree, right? Well, I could have been really offended by that. I could have said, hey, this lady just bounced off of me. And hey, she didn't even give me the time of day. What's going on? Which would have probably been a common way of doing it when I grew up, because that's one of the cultural things that I had growing up is that you want to be able to interact with people in a way that says, oh, I'm sorry, I bumped into you. But that's not what happened. Well, the first thing I did was I didn't get offended. And the second thing that happened, I didn't get mad at her. But I got to thinking about this, and I thought about this for a long time. And this is my theory. This is my official theory of this. And that is I was a pop-up screen. Yeah, I was a pop-up screen. So what happens when you're on your computer and a pop-up screen comes up? What do? You try to get it off as quickly as possible to go back to what you were concentrating on, that you wanted to concentrate on, right? So pop-up screens are there just enough to make you have to deal with them so it's in your mind for a second, I guess. I'd have to talk to an advertiser for sure, but that's what I'm thinking. So anyway, what happened was when she bounced off me, I became a pop-up screen. What did she do? She got rid of it. How did she get rid of it? She walked off to the right and just moved on, and then I was behind her and no longer in her field of consciousness with regard to that. So I think sometimes one of the things are happening more and more is we are becoming pop-up screens for things that are unwanted for the person who's focused on something else. And we need to slow that down and be careful. You know, more and more schools are starting curriculum where kids have to interact more and more with each other rather than be that involved with their screens. Jean Twenge's research is wonderful. I think she's out of San Diego State, and she's really talking about not only how this affects people, but 5 generations of people. So check her Generations book out. I might actually do a whole show on that. That was so interesting when I read it. So one of the things we want to begin to do is to look at how do we get back to a way that we can really maintain the relationships in the way we want. Let's take a break. And when I come back, I'm going to talk to you from the mailbag. So let's talk then. And I look forward to seeing you back in a minute.
Mike Zorek, a 3-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a 6-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2 thirds, and 2 fourths. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
And we're back and welcome. And the second part of our show is going to be calls from the mailbag or check-ins or whatever they're called. But first thing I want to do is put up my contact information. What I really hope is people will give me feedback on how they like my show and what they would like more of or less of, right? So if you look at the screen and you follow that or take a picture of it or just go back for a rerun, you can look at how to follow me and how to get on the show so that you can watch them. The other thing too is I will eventually be doing some call-ins. So if you like to call in and talk to me, you can do that. But this is just how to get in touch with me and how to give me feedback on what you're thinking and what you'd like more of. So thank you very much. Please do that. So the next thing we're going to do is our mailbag. This is pretty fun for me. I know one of the things I try to do when I have questions from the mailbag is not really look at the questions until just about before I'm going to go on the air. I need to make sure that they're okay. But I like to think about them just doing this kind of spontaneously. I enjoy that the most when I do public speaking. I really like what I call stump the band there. This is what I call shrink wrap. But what it basically is just give me some good questions that you need to know the answer to that you're concerned about, and I'll do my best to answer them. So one of the things I also like to do is find them that are germane to the show that we're doing. So the first question I have is, I catch myself being critical all the time. How do I slow down before I say something I regret? Well, first off, you always want to build a culture of appreciation. And what I mean by that is that you want to be able to have a situation where even when you have a problem, you're reactive. You want to slow down and not react, right? So you want to take a deep breath, you want to slow down, and you want to look at what may have triggered you or what may have made that bigger than it should have been. Now, for some people, it's just you had a bad day. Let's say you just got back home from a traffic jam or something. So, things that are essentially just human can really cause that to happen. But if you're finding yourself critical more and more, one of the things that can happen with that is that you want to slow down and look at the stressors in your life, right? The other thing you want to do is to let your partner know, lead with vulnerable intimacy. Honey, I'm having a bad day today. Or, hey, you know what? I find myself a little bit snappy. I'm sorry. That's the antidote for defensiveness. Take responsibility, right? And then the other thing you're doing is something I call non-defensive responding. Non-defensive responding is kind of gently explaining maybe where you're at without really, showing people by using a horseman or a harsh startup or being crabby or something like that, right? So that's one of the things that I want to do, is to help myself slow down to realize what's in my body before I react. Okay. Breathing actually really helps. I know sometimes that's given a bad name because it's all kind of, I don't know, kumbaya is what they used to call it, but it's not. I mean, the breathing with the relaxation actually helps slow down your heart rate and helps you think better. The other thing too is you don't have to respond so quickly, right? We don't. We can stop and think, what's going on with me first. Next question. I forgive my partner in my head, but sometimes my tone still sounds sharp. How do I line up those words with those intentions? Well, that's a good point, and it actually builds on what I was just talking about. The tone is a criticism in and of itself a lot of times. Another thing we can do is we can do facial expressions like, those kind of things could really send signals to our partner that they're annoying, right? Now, remember, communication is only 25% efficient. So, you start putting a few of these things together and people can really start to think, wow, you're mad at me. And you could have just had a bad day. So, talking about what's going on with you inside can really help slow down your words. Because sometimes when we get all ramped up, we start talking like a dolphin, and that can also be seen as criticism, right? So, those are just some ways to really pay attention to that. The other thing, too, is you can talk to your partner and say, hey, look, if you catch me being snarky, could you gently just point it out so I can kind of try a do over? Because sometimes I might be tired or something, and I don't want to send all of that over to you. Okay. So let's see, question number 3. Let's take a look at that one. I'm quick to find fault. What are some practical ways to notice the good instead? Well, remember, and I like how you said that, we need to have 5 positives for every 1 negative with our partner. Technically, the research is 5 minutes to 1 minute, but that's a good rule of thumb. Try to think 5 positives for every 1 negative. The reason we know that from research, Gottman research, is that negative weighs more in terms of relationships. So if you say something that's negative, it tends to stick with us more. So we want to pay attention to that, and we want to try to make sure if we do use a negative to balance that, right? So one thing that we can also do is we can ask ourselves, why are we so quick to find fault? If that's happening more and more, it probably requires a discussion with your person. Okay. It probably requires a, hey, I noticed that I've just been a little more critical of you or testy of you, or I noticed that I'm finding fault a lot. And then what I would do is, if it's not an argument that needs to really be looked at, go back to the friendship house and start paying more attention and look for the things that you really like about your partner. Build that culture of fondness and admiration. Find things and catch people doing it right, not catching them doing it wrong. These sounds like little things, but it's to me, it's in the weeding the garden department. Those are just those little things that you need to do each day. And you can even, make bids for connection like that. You can send little quick texts, not long ones, but just thinking about you, saw something funny I'll tell you when I get home. Saw something that you would have found funny. Anything that just basically says you're thinking about your partner can go a long, long way. So those are just some things, I guess, to think about. So the other thing we can kind of look at is that, it requires both of you. And what I mean by that is that, you can ask your partner, look, are you finding yourself critical of me? Or you might ask questions, is there anything that I can do better to make your world a little better? Or have you noticed that you're disconnected from me? I'm not seeing it, but do you notice that? And then when they do, again, think of leading with vulnerable intimacy, meaning that they're showing you a vulnerability or a weakness, usually means there's some fear somewhere. So what you want to do is lean into that fear in a way that makes them feel safe. That's really, really, really important. We do that with children all the time, and it's a really good thing. And what we want to do is extend it to our partner. I've been doing this for over 40 years, and I love working with couples, and I've always worked with couples, and now I specialize in it. And I find that, couples, even though they're grown up and they're happening and all this stuff, they're really, really vulnerable to their partner's opinion of them. Maybe even more so than when we were four. I don't know. Somebody should do a study. But I do think that we need to pay attention to the fact that when we really are attacking or critical of our partner, it really hurts. It really hurts. So it hurts us and them. So let's see, the last one, and then we'll go to another break. And that is, sometimes forgiveness feels too big. What should I do? Well, we're going to talk about that in the third segment. So that's pretty timely that we put that one at the very end of this. But one of the things that you can do is you can look at what's been building up that makes that forgiveness harder and harder. You're going to hear that word when I get back, and it's called negative overriding sentiment, and it's the opposite of positive perspective. And what happens is that we feel so hurt that we're actually so on guard for hurt that we stay in the conflict house too much. But more to the point, we start looking and collecting the things that are negative. So let's go ahead and take a break, and we'll come back and look at some of those things.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
All right, welcome back. We are going to go to our next segment. And actually, today it's kind of my favorite segment. We've talked a little bit about kind of what can go wrong, but I wanted to really focus on something lighter today, with things that we really can do that's within our power to do. And, back to that weeding the garden, doing things every day, what John and Julie call little things often. It's what masters marriages do. And one thing that I've talked about before is thinking about riding on a bike trail with your partner. Now, if you think about it, you're going to make micro movements to not only stay balanced on your bike, but to not fall over and knock your partner off their bike. And you're also going to be looking up the trail so that you can see whether there's puddles or low branches or twigs or rocks in the road, right? And the other thing you're doing is you're doing that in concert with your partner so that they don't have any, calamity too. So you might be pointing out a rock in their part of the trail so that they miss that. And the other thing you're doing once you do that really, really well is you're really there to feel the breeze and look at the trees and the wheat fields and just all of the fun things that riding a bike in the country might have to offer. So it's all of those things at once. It's form and function, as you see. So we're going to talk about kind of how to make those little micro movements on the bike in a way that really helps. And one of the big things, we'll put up the Relationship House by the Gottman Institute. And I want you to call attention to the bottom part, which is build love maps, fondness and admiration, and turn towards. That's the 86% I was telling you about. But the one above it is the one we're going to play with today, and that is the positive perspective, right? So I'll get to that in a second. But one of the things we were talking about in our last question right before the break was, why is it that we kind of get stuck in that conflict house? Well, one of the symptoms that can occur is when we go offline or we go off plumb with regard to the positive perspective, and we go into what is called negative sentiment override. Okay. So what happens with negative sentiment override is we have these little micro hurts that keep hurting us, that keep causing problems. And what we do is we build up enough of these unresolved conflicts to where we begin to assume the negative about our partner rather than the positive about our partner. So we're kind of looking for it. All right. Now, I don't know whether you've ever had that, but think about it. Maybe you have. So I'm going to give you my corny example. Okay. And this is my metal detector example. This is how it goes. Let's say I have one of those really sophisticated metal detectors. Now, for those of you who've never been to the beach or never seen one of these are like little radars that go and they shoot, I guess, signals into the sand. And if there's something that's underneath the sand, it tells you it's there. So if you dig in, you might get something good. You might get a diamond ring, you might get a gold watch, something that somebody lost on the beach that rolled up on the beach that might be valuable. So sometimes people will take these metal detectors, and while they're walking on the beach to get their exercise, they also go back and forth with their metal detector to see what pops up. Okay, so this doesn't exist, I don't think, but let's pretend. Let's say I have a metal detector that I can put specifically to gold watches, or specifically I can put to diamond rings, or I can put it to bottle caps and a few others, but let's say those are the main ones. Well, let's say I decide to go out and walk 4 miles, and in doing so, check out the beach, and I put mine on bottle caps. So every time there's a bottle cap, my metal detector goes off, and I have myself a bottle cap. So I reach into the sand, I put it in my bag, and I keep walking. So at the end of my walk, I have a bag full of bottle caps. All right, that's really cool. How many gold watches do I have? None. How many diamond rings? Well, none. But what if there was a gold watch under there? Well, I wasn't programmed to find that. I was programmed to find the bottle caps. So what we do is we don't look for the gold. We look for the bottle caps. And in real life, when we get into negative sentiment override, we begin to turn that metal detector on to see the negative about our partner. Now, why would we do that? I mean, we're sitting there going, well, boy, that's dumb. I wouldn't want to do that. Why would I want to drift away from my partner like that? Usually it's symptomatic. It usually has to do with the fact that we've been hurt or neglected in some way. I mean, if you really want to get fancy sometimes with people, it can be something from past relationships or childhood or something like that. But this is an educational show, so let's just stay with the idea that there's a lot of reasons why we could have an injury and maybe not want to go to our partner about that. Well, now we're not leading with vulnerable intimacy either. And now maybe we drift away from kind of communicating. Well, so now we're missing our bids. So you can see the friendship house that I mentioned earlier start to be impacted by the negative sentiment override. Okay. Let's just say we're kind of that way. Let's just say we kind of are programmed to avoid the negative, right? I think of Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh because most people have seen that. And Eeyore will say, if it is a good day, which I doubt, he's not going to see the good stuff. He's going to be looking at what's not good, and he's going to doubt anything's good happen. And if something good does happen, well, he may not like that because he had to change or do something out of something he preferred to do. But that's negative sentiment override, isn't it? So we don't want that. We want to try to get out of it, and we want to respect why we are in it. So let's look at that a little bit. So I'm going to go to the good. And the good is let's get out of that negative sentiment override and let's get into what we call positive sentiment, okay, on the relationship house. Okay, so what happens here is that when there's enough positivity, that it overrides the negative situation, right? So the probability of being positive is going to be greater than the probability of being negative. And it will open up an opportunity for us to share in repairing, connecting, reaching out in certain ways, right? So what we want to do is we want to lead with that repair, right? Now, once we've said, hey, I'm really sorry. I was crabby today and I had a bad day at work and I came home and you said something to me and I snapped at you. You know what? That's on me. I'm really sorry, right? So what we want to do is we want to apologize for what we could have done better. That's also the antidote for defensiveness, okay? So when somebody apologizes to you, this sounds kind of little, but I find it's not. When somebody apologizes to you, accept the apology, right? Gee, I'm sorry I was crabby. Well, you should be. Well, that's a couple horsemen right there, maybe. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. What we want to do is say, hey, yeah, it kind of did hurt my feelings. Thank you for noticing and taking care of me. What I ideally like is for something to then happen like this. And you were crabby today, but last week, remember, I was crabby and you were really cool about it. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for doing that back then. People like, especially from their most important person, to notice when they have pain. Well, I kind of call it an owie because, I think back to little kids. But, when somebody's hurting, you want to say, hey, I'm sorry you're hurting. So you want to do that in a compassionate way, which means you want to have a gentle voice for it, right? After the repairs have happened, right, building positive perspective, what we want to do is return back to the friendship house. Hey, let's go do something and connect. Now, remember, the magic ratio that John and Julie Gottman talk about is 5 minutes to 1 minute, positive to negative. So you really want to stay at least 5 to 1. But when you guys are really connecting, you might be at 20 to 1. So, I mean, it's not hard to do because there's a lot of bids that happen just in one smile and a look, right? So if I see somebody that I really am happy with and they say me and I look up and I smile and I wave, there's a lot of positive bids in that. So, it doesn't mean to say you have to keep complimenting them 5 times. It just means you have to show interest and care and that you really appreciate and like them. Okay. All right. So try to get it so our partner and when you look, you both do the same. If somebody apologizes, accept the apology, but throw something back that says, hey, you know what? I did this and I was sorry for that too. Sometimes what you do is you pick up on some that should have been done that weren't. So that's kind of nice, right? So what you want to do is practice that fondness and admiration with your partner. And what I like to think is to go into that positive, spontaneous zone. I always think spontaneous control, rigid control, chaos. So what I want to do is get out of controlling and I want to move into being just kind of light and airy and happy and fun. And hey, what are we going to eat tonight? Hey, we ought to watch a show. Hey, you know what? I kind of wanted to go walking with you and then hold hands. I'd love to hold your hand and go walk today. What do you think? And remember, if you don't want to do that, you have to give something that you would like to do. Hey, I'd love to go out, but it's going to be 105 today here in Texas. And that seems a little hot to me. Why don't we just stay in and maybe do a board game together, or maybe we could do something on the exercise machines together a little bit, right? Something that would be together that you both would enjoy. And then you go back and forth until you both agree with it. And then, you're really, really on your way. So that's just super important. Okay. But another thing to kind of point out is that we as people sometimes can become conflict averse. We don't like conflict. We don't like to talk about it. Oh gosh, there's going to be a conflict. Oh boy, let's get out of this. The problem is you can't. Be nice, but conflict is inevitable. We're going to step on each other's toes. We just, try to think of just going through a day without inadvertently miscommunicating, inadvertently stepping on each other's toes. You were going to do something and you can't because somebody else didn't do something. My favorite is you go to maybe get the dishes done, but the clean dishes weren't put away. Anything like that. We just step on each other's toes. So we don't avoid these, we expect them. Okay. So don't assume they're just going to go away. And if you do, you're going to start maybe potentially collecting them, right? So one thing that we need to do is something called a regrettable incident exercise. I have not taught you that yet, but that's one of the things that is a really good intervention to help with things that are just annoying that happen and where we step on each other's toes. Okay. So let's see, what else do I have on my notes? But yeah, back to feedback from people. I mean, if people give me enough, hey, Don, really, could you do that exercise for me? Probably move it up the list. Okay. But here's the other thing, and this is a cautionary tale, and this is to the ugly. All right. And that is, we talked about drift, where people just get so fed up with things happening all the time, perpetual problems, that they just start taking it personally. And in so taking it personally, what happens is they start collecting them. And then if you look at the drift exercises and the drift dilemma that I showed last week, that's one of the real doors towards that. So we want to be careful with that. I don't want to stay too much into what really, really can go wrong with the ugly. But as I said, I've talked about it before. Okay. So I do hope that the people who listen to this and are watching the show aren't in that quicksand where, they're going down that predictable step to really everything is an argument. All they do is stay in the conflict house. They start to drift away from the friendship house. They can't talk about higher meaning stuff. That happens. And I'll probably talk about when those things really can go wrong. Suffice it to say, if you look at the betrayal, episode from 2 ago and you look at drift, if you stay away from having drift happen that bad, chances are some of the things I'm talking about will really, really work for you today. Okay, so that's good. Well, I'm looking at my time and I think this would be a good time for us to take a break, and then we're going to go back for that fun thing we always try to do this week to see if that makes our relationship better. So I'll see you in a minute, and then we'll go to our actual fourth segment, and let's have some fun.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom. purpose, passion, power, and peace, all quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life.
And we are back. Thanks for coming back and joining us. This show goes so fast. It's really impressive. I like the fact nowadays people can go back and binge watch these, and they can slow it down and take notes or however they want to do that. You know, my imagining of this is people watch it and they go home and watch it with their person. So I hope those things that you can do. You know, I talked a little bit about earlier before we go into our fun thing to do about ways of connecting. And one thing that the Gottman Institute has is they're free, but you can go to the App Store and look for card decks, Gottman card decks. And if you do, my suggestion to start out would just look at love map cards and open-ended cards. The open-ended cards are really designed to get you talking, just talking about some topic, right? And the other one is a game. Now, if you play it, you got to do it this way. If you play it, it may ask you a question you may not know about your partner, or you may know it, but it's changed over time. So a love map might be like, what's your favorite color? Or what's your favorite thing to do? You see, now those things change over time. So sometimes you might say something and your partner goes, well, no, not anymore. I used to do that. What you don't want to do is, you mean you don't know my favorite color? Because that's a criticism. What we want to do instead is say, no, dear, it's not green, it's blue. And this is why it's blue. And then an open-ended question, tell me when the first time you realized that blue was your favorite color. So just, it's an opportunity to get to know your partner. You know, sometimes what'll happen, if you ever notice like first or second dates, once people get going and they kind of want to see the person more, they like them, and both of them are trying to get the second date, right? They may start talking about what they like. Somebody may say, well, what do you like to do? And they may say, oh, you know, I love to ice skate. Really? Well, when did you first learn to ice skate? Oh, I was 6, you know, and my big brother and my big sister loved to ice skate, and they used to go, and I wasn't able to until I was finally a certain age. And then I went and they both helped me. And I got to be fairly good at it. And I really just enjoy it. It's very relaxing to me. You see how all of a sudden that open-ended question gives that? And that person may say, well, what do you like that much? And then the next thing they do is to say, oh, my goodness, you know, I like bowling, or I like curling, or I like, you know, just jogging or something. And then they talk about their experiences with it. Those are open-ended questions, and they work just as good after you've known each other, even if it's been 40 years or 30 years or 20. You know, what's going on with you? What do you like? What's your new interest? Because interests change all the time. But what's important is your person wants to feel well known by you. So these are really important things. So anyway, let's get back to kind of our fun thing today. What I want you to do is go to your person and tell them you watched my show today, and that our assignment today was think of something that we were critical of in the past week, own it. You know, I did this, right? I was crabby, I was snarky or something, and make that repair. And you know what? I really shouldn't have been. It's been on my mind, and I just hate it when I do that, so I'm sorry. So you say what the problem is, then what you say you could have done better, right? That's exactly what we did. You know what I could have done was just taken a couple deep breaths and maybe just tell you I was in a bad mood. You know, I should have done that, but instead you found out the hard way because I snarked at you. But that third part, that apology, is so important. I wish I had done it better. I wish I had a do-over, right? And then finally, you know, really say a very sincere, I'm sorry, and then throw in an I love you. Throw in a, boy, you really matter to me. Boy, you're really neat. Something that's really important. Now, what they're supposed to do, like I said earlier today, is to accept your apology and ideally do the same thing back. But they didn't watch my show. You did. So they may not know the new rules. So what you want to do is say, hey, one of the things we learned today with this was that we're supposed to go back and forth. So why don't we practice one? Why don't we just try one? Even if it's just silly and fun. But if they don't, invite the opportunity to do it. And in the future, in a soft way, say, hey, maybe down the road, if we do this again, we could try it again, right? The thing I really like with this stuff is to really say something that's uniquely wonderful about your partner to you and tell them that you love them. We don't do that enough in our society. Back when I was a kid, I don't know. I mean, the culture of a lot of the people I was around, you didn't really say that to people. I don't even know that you complimented kids a lot when I was a kid. And I'm not putting anybody down. It just, they were sometimes of the opinion that would make you weak or soft if they complimented you. We know that it's good to let kids know that we encourage them. But remember the difference between flattery and praise. And it's one thing to flatter somebody, they're the neatest kid on the planet, which is absolutely true. But in my case, they may not have been the best baseball player in the world. So if I wasn't a good baseball player and you kept telling me how great I was, I think that would have been wrong, right? So flattery versus praise, be aware. But be genuine with your partner about why you like them and why you think they're so neat. This is very, very important. The other thing, too, is remember safety first. You know your partner. I do not. And you want to be able to do things in ways that really work. For some of these, remember, it's educational, not therapy, but some problems do require consideration with regard to having a therapist to really kind of untangle some of the things that have been tangled up. So sometimes that is necessary, but certainly these are always going to be news you can use and what I always call best tips or best practices for how things work. But the end result is your relationship. I don't. So you want to make sure that when you do that it's done in a way that's loving, safe, and offers the possibility of connection and not danger. So, all right. Well, I'm going to head out. Thank you for listening and watching. Remember, when it comes to relationships, we really aren't in a fair fight. There's so much pulling against relationships. One of the reasons I do this show is to pull towards the positive side of things and to make sure that you all have the best chance to have long lasting and loving relationships, whether it be marriage or whatever your special relationship is. I invite feedback, I invite the connection, but remember, I like to build this family of people who really, really want to have healthy relationships, not only in their lives, but for everyone. So I'll say goodbye. We'll catch you next week, and thank you for listening.
While All About Relationships is educational and entertaining, it is not a substitute for therapy, counseling, or professional advice, but an informative space for learning and growth. So tune in each week for an engaging and reliable approach to your relationships, ensuring viewers with practical tools to create deeper connections in their daily lives. Whether tackling conflict resolution, emotional intimacy, or family dynamics, this show is your go-to resource for anyone looking to foster healthier, happier relationships in a supportive and lighthearted environment. Every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern.